Public sector workers are a particularly interesting example given the huge cutbacks that we're seeing at all levels of the public sector in this day and age, and not just in the UK, but in a lot of advanced economies. And these are people who are in decent work and good jobs that are disappearing. So once those jobs are abolished, there's not equivalent quality work that's being made in the labour market. And so this group who have long work histories of perhaps decent full-time employment and quite stable employment will find themselves in a very difficult labour market position, and there may not be opportunities available to them as they move into their retirement.
Well, first of all, there has been this massive increase in work after retirement almost in every member state in the European Union. There are only 4 member states which have been particularly hit by the crisis, where there was a decrease observed over the last 4 years. At the moment, almost 11% of people aged between 65 and 69 work, which are almost exclusively retirees. Why has that been the case? Well, there are 2 drivers. People need to work or people want to work. They have financial need to work because their income from other sources after retirement has decreased. And on the other hand, there's also a big share of people who would like to work after their retirement.
Countries which have high rates of employment for older people also tend to have high rates of employment for young people, and vice versa. I think what people often like to think is that the jobs of older people and younger people are competing with one another. In fact, the jobs which older and younger people do tend to be very different, and if there is any relationship at all, it is a relationship of complementarity, not a relationship of substitution. Now, that is the case across the board and over time, but that is a sort of equilibrium situation. In a disequilibrium and in a period of change and crisis, and we're sitting in a period of change and crisis at the moment, that relationship, that long-term relationship, might not obtain. And so it might be the case that older people do compete with some of the jobs for younger people. In other words, more older people in work means fewer younger people. But that is in a point of disequilibrium. It's a bit like what happened during the Industrial Revolution. People went around bashing up steam looms because those were going to take away their jobs. And in the short term, they did take away their jobs. But in the medium and longer term, there were far more jobs in textile industries and people working on these looms than had ever been before. So we have to think about the short and the long term.
Well, we did some research that was relatively novel for the UK. It's based on some research that was done recently in the USA, looking at current working age population and their current behaviour around saving and a pension, and what that means potentially for their future adequacy. And what we found was that only 40% of people who are currently still in work between those ages might be able to replicate working life living standards in retirement by the time they reach state pension age. Which are rather stark figures and might be quite a shock for people really when they're reaching retirement at how much of a drop in income they might need to have or how long they might need to work in order to sort of provide themselves with an income that they might find desirable.
One of the things that is going to happen in October is, phasing in October, is automatic enrolment, where every single employee will be automatically enrolled into a company pension scheme, and they then have to contribute, and their employer also has to contribute. And that is an issue because these pension schemes are defined contribution, and it means that from very many employees, they they won't actually have an idea of how much income they're going to get when they retire. You know that at the moment with the state pension, and most workers that are retiring actually have a vague idea. They look at retirement in terms of replacement rate, the percentage of their salary. But I think in the future what we're going to find is, as I say, that these individuals just will have no idea, that they will be much poorer than they expect to be. So I say we will have declining living standards among older people.
I think a big challenge for the future of retirement is how we can support people in terms of making decisions and choices about extending the working life. If we're looking to the United States, for example, this was one of the first countries to really address the problems of pensions and that kind of thing that occur because of age dependency rates changing. A lot of their policies in the mid-1980s were about extending employment rights to people in order to enable them to continue working into older age. So the Reagan administration abolished mandatory retirement in 1986. And one of the key purposes of doing that was to enable poorer people to continue working, and so they could retire at a point at which they were financially able to basically stop working. Now this is problematic because what actually happened was people continued working into older age, but the groups that were least likely to work into older age were the exact same people who were supposed to be, i.e. poorer people. And the consequences of not working in a context where benefits for poorer older people were in decline is large amounts of poverty. Now clearly that's an unattractive way of extending the working life. We need to have policies that enable choice, but to be founded on some kind of degree of financial security.
One of the things I'd like to see more research on, and particularly in a policy context, is the age challenge for businesses in developing countries. There hasn't been very much research on that because they aren't facing the same age crisis that European countries and the United States are facing. However, their demographic window is much smaller than it's been for Europe, so they're going to have to address the issues quite a bit quicker. However, there are a lot of good practices and a lot of experience that's been happening in Europe and America, which could then be applied to developing countries. So there's a lot more opportunity to address the issues of age demographics in developing countries, but they need to start acting quickly, and I think that this should be a priority area for researchers and for policy experts.
I definitely think we need more research on how to move forward from just suggestions related to good workforce practices, and even some examples of innovative practices are now out there in the public domain. We've done that research for the last 4 or 5 years, and I really think we now need to move forward and look at how we can embed those into organizational culture, and how we can also look at more integrated policies which really look across the whole age spectrum, not just focusing at older workers, but looking at intergenerational working. So what I would like us to do is really move beyond that and move into a more respect of the other who is from a different generation, and really work together in order to bring out the best for companies as well as for society.